A new statement from the acting chief of the Capitol Police calls for, quote, permanent fencing around the Capitol and the availability of ready backup forces in close proximity to the Capitol. That heightened security is something that lawmakers have been actively trying to avoid now for years.
Yeah, so Democratic strategist and the maestro himself, Roger Fisk, and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kossoff, they join us now to discuss. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. Never going to let you live that down, Roger.
Yeah, I guess I'm wearing it like a tattoo at this point.
But you should. Roger, let me start with you. I mean, this is something that, look, obviously the heinous attack on the Capitol, it was terrible. But something Crystal and I and many others have been warning now for the last month or so is, look, I mean, if you have 100 other cops there, 100 more cops there on the day of, this entire situation looks completely different. And as somebody who remembers what it was like to actually be able to just go stand in front of the gate of the White House not that long ago, I think there is something that is lost civically whenever you're not able to do so. I think about children who visit Washington, unable to go up to the Capitol or the White House. What do you think of this?
First off, good morning, and it's always wonderful to be here with Marshall. Thanks so much for having me. I roughly agree. You know, it's frustrating when you look at it in a kind of a policy and also a security context when, for example, after Richard Reed tried to ignite his shoes on a plane and we all had to take our shoes off, and then lo and behold, a couple box cutters was just enough to hijack a bunch of planes and fly them into the towers. So there's a tendency on the part of law enforcement to constantly, similar to, you know, some of the old phrases about the military, is fight the last war, right? And I think what we need to do here is be constantly kind of looking forward. In an operational context, I think this makes sense for the short term, because I think it's fair to say, especially based on the guy from West Virginia, either yesterday or the day before, that was found around the Capitol with a bunch of ammunition and a list of elected officials, that this makes sense. But it's just for me, and I think we share this as a citizen, it's frustrating to see most of the federal buildings still essentially in like a 9/11 posture, right? With these massive concrete urns around them to keep people, I guess, from driving into them or something like that. I think what this ends up with, similar to kind of our posture in some of the places where we have withdrawn troops, is more of an emphasis on intelligence and anticipation with the ability to react quickly, rather than kind of like a 20th century boots on the ground kind of approach. But at least for the short term, I think it's something that we have to do, because I think it's fair to say temperatures are still quite high.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's absolutely fair. But Marshall, you know, I see this as one more sort of worrying signal. We got news that there's going to be somewhere around 5,000 National Guardsmen remaining in, you know, the Capitol region indefinitely. We have this new permanent fencing going in. You've got the White House launching a comprehensive threat assessment. You have mainstream calls for a new domestic terror law. So it feels like Groundhog's Day, where you take something that was a legitimately horrific event and you use it to justify all of this national security state overreach.
Yeah, the key thing is to really go play by play with every one of these examples. So let's take taking off your shoes at the airport. That's annoying. It's fine. The increased fencing at the White House, like Sagar, I'm right there with you, both in terms of being a GW student, but also coming to DC as a kid. Sucks, but we're going to find a way to live with it, especially given the fact that there were just these increased incidences of people hopping the fence. You know, Andrew Jackson used to invite people into the White House on an inaugural day. I'm sure that was really cool too, but at a certain point, we have to adjust to reality. And then when it comes to, Roger, your articulation of the next 3-6 months, this is a heightened time. I am completely fine with an increased National Guard presence in the city. I'm okay with the anti-bombing things you see post 9/11. That being said, I think, Crystal, what you're speaking to is the frustration that people feel that this is very arbitrary and capricious. So it's not that they are making these security choices that people are objecting to. What people are objecting to is, wait, like, why does that fencing have to be permanent? Do we actually believe there was an actual process where the FBI, the DOD actually sat down and made an empirical assessment? Or is a lot of this theater to make up for the incompetence that we saw on January 6th? So it's the real important need to separate those two different dynamics from each other.
Yeah, I think that's right, which is that, look, you know, in the abstract, or sorry, in the concrete, you can say this decision, that decision. But I think Marshall's point is correct, which is that how much of this, Roger, is just like trying to make up for the fact that what happened and then overreaching to a point where, I mean, now the troops, they say they're going to be here until late March until after the impeachment trial. Okay, I mean, are they going to come up with another decision? Is the fencing ever going to come down? Like, this is, and I don't feel like there's sufficient public pressure, because this is something Glenn Greenwald always points to, which is that, as long as there is a threat and it seems justifiable in the moment, then it's something that can transfer to, now 19 years later, it could be the similar situation in the future.
Yeah, we always think of these things as if people are going to be cognizant of consequences, right? And I'm going to sound like a conservative here, but if someone's willing to break the law, or someone's willing to surmount some bike rack or some fencing or whatever, then obviously it's just a question of time until they're willing to surmount a different fence or a higher fence or anything like that. So if you grant that passions are going to run high, and that people are going to take it upon themselves to try to storm a particular building, then unless you encase that in some kind of sarcophagus of concrete or something like that, people are going to find a way in. For example, you could start playing around with drones and any number of other things. So, I join you in the incrementalism, right? If you just look at this in a drip, drip, drip context, it's a little bit of our mobility here, a little bit of our freedom there. Unfortunately, the flip side of this is that what would normally, the constituency that would normally be shoulder to shoulder with people arguing against this, also have their fingerprints all over the causes for the heightened concerns and the perceptions of threat, which I think are real. So in that sense, it kind of, the natural chorus that would be joining someone who would be concerned about this negates kind of their own legitimacy, because their fingerprints are all over this.
Yeah.
I
think
Quick
that's fair.
thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marshall.
Quick thing just to build on that is, what I do want to caution against, though, is over focusing on narratives like, what if we lose our freedom? How far did this go? Because what we're talking about is that January 6th was mishandled. Like, sorry, but a lot of the professional take havers on Twitter who are tweeting about how this is all bad would have objected to putting 5,000 troops in the Capitol on January 6th beforehand. So these same people that would have actually attacked the security decisions that would have made this better. So I think that is the moderate tone we need to take here, and just recognize we have to look at it empirically.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful analysis as always, gentlemen. Stick with us. We got more with Team Rising right after this.